These large language models could really do with some standardization. I'm Eric, and in this video I'm going to be talking about formats for tool calling or function calling across different models, and I'm also going to get tool calling working in Pewter's Gemini implementation for the Pewter Chat Completion driver interface. Hello, this is Eric from Video Editor Land. I said earlier that I'm going to talk about the differences in tool use and function calling, and then do a tier list, and then implement the Gemini integration for tool use in Pewter. Recording implementing that did not go very well, from what I remember, so I'm not even going to bother including it in this video. It was kind of boring to watch anyway. So I'm going to talk about the differences in tool calling or tool use and function calling, which is kind of boring, and then I'm going to do a tier list. So if you want to skip to the tier list, that might be more interesting. It's still not incredibly interesting, but hey, it's a tier list. What do you want from me? I've created the same example in each of the different formats for um, tool calling where there's just one function available for getting the weather in a specific city. In the middle, we have OpenAI that the industry revolves around. They set conventions that other people are going to reference. We've got Anthropic on the right. They take they look at what OpenAI does. They make their own innovations, and it's always maybe for future proofing and that sort of thing. Um, we have Google. I am, of course, referring to this meme that you've probably seen before. Ruby is cool, Python is beautiful, JavaScript, Haskell is intriguing. The reason why is if you look at the formats between Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google, you'll find that Google's format is the most different, and there don't seem to be any clear reasons why. They just decided to use different conventions and different names for things. In the case of tool calling, though, this isn't incredibly relevant because OpenAI and Anthropic, their tool calling formats are pretty different as well. So Google isn't really the odd one out in this specific case. Actually, while I'm criticizing unconventional AI formats, shout out to Mistral's SDK, which coerces their otherwise conventional API to just put things in lower camel case for some reason. That was a huge pain to deal with. Okay, so now we'll go over the differences between the formats, and then we'll make a tier list because that's how I'm going to generate the thumbnail that will lead you to clicking this video. For each of these models, let's look at how they make a tool call and what sending the result for that tool call looks like. Starting with OpenAI's format, we have a tool calls object here, or tool calls list, which is just a list of objects specifying calls that it wants to make, and that goes in the message object. Claude does something a little bit different. Claude puts tool use as objects in the content block. So alongside text or images, an item of the content block might be a tool call, in this case to get the weather. It's hard to say which of these I like better. I think I lean toward Claude, but let me explain the pros and cons that I can see between these two conventions. OpenAI's convention is safe from breaking other people's code that are using the model because if the code wasn't written to be aware of this tool calls property, it's just going to ignore it. That said, I guess strictly speaking, whatever thing is running won't work because the tool call won't work, so it'll still break, but it won't cause perhaps like unexpected behavior or an exception to be thrown, most likely. Claude's format says a tool call is another type of item that can go in the content block, just like text or an image. There's already a precedent set that there could be something in the content block then that your code doesn't understand because of a new model or something was upgraded. So I think it's reasonable to assume people will have written their software integrating with AI with this in mind, that the array content is not just going to contain messages and images or whatever were the only things that existed when they wrote that code. It also gives the opportunity to say if there was a new feature in the future and an item appeared in the content block, your program could say, hey, user, I just got this thing. I don't know how to deal with it. Here's what information I have so that you can deal with it, because then that puts the user in control a bit more and maybe they can fix an actual problem that is happening. I think that's why I lean more toward Claude's format. Um, but at the end of the day, they both work, and they're likely in any important application, they're going to be coerced into a common format anyway, like what we do on Pewter. So does it really matter? Maybe it doesn't. Gemini's format, as per usual, is the most different, but this is many of these differences aren't related to function calling specifically. Like content is called parts for some reason. That's just how it does. We have a function call part, so this isn't type tagged, but I guess if it has the property function call, then it's a function call, and the name is function name. Interesting thing I noticed here is there's no ID. I don't I don't know if that's a problem though, because you could just send your responses in order, right? So maybe it's fine. So let's look at the responses now. So the response for OpenAI's format has rule tool and a tool call ID and some content, which is the return value of the function that was called. Claude is, again, a little bit different. We have role user, and we have a content block. Between these two, I absolutely prefer Claude's convention. I think it makes a lot more sense because the return value uh, of a tool call can come from different roles. So if a role is like an entity or an actor in your conversation, different kind of entities or actors could provide sort of their own tools or their own answers to a function call. Maybe you could get more than one. I'm not sure if that's supported right now. It probably isn't, but it leaves room for that in the future. OpenAI's format means if you have a tool response, the role is tool, right? You can't associate that with anything else anymore, so that property is already reserved for just saying that this is a tool result. So that to me seems like a bit of a mistake on OpenAI's part. Gemini, let's see how that was. So Gemini follows a bit closer to Claude's convention then. It has role user, and then in its parts, it has a function response. Property name quirks aside, I think they made a good decision going with that approach. So now that we have looked at all of these, it's time to go to the tier list. Now, before I go and Google tier list creator, it's probably just the first result on Google. I'm going to try using code with AI and Pewter because that would just be more fun. So I'm going to say make a tier list creator with the logos of, I'm really curious if that will work, Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic. Okay, this might work. How can I get this in a different view? Let's see, I just want the preview. Can I do that? Viewer mode, normal mode. Okay, I'm not figuring this out. I think what I'll do is I'll just deploy the app. The Anthropic logo seems to be missing, so We'll just pretend that it's there. Anthropic's logo is now the broken image icon, so that's pretty funny. We'll start with Google. So what do I remember about Google's format? Google's format has a redundant wrapper around tools, but that might be good because we don't have to put type function on every object. We're wrapping different types. Um, Function calls don't have IDs. I think that's potentially a big problem. If you've written some code that integrates with AI and it assumes that function calls have IDs, it's not going to work, right? And if you're running these function calls in parallel and putting the results together, you might now need to ensure that these results are in the same order because Google's format would have to rely on order if they support multiple tool calls. Um, Tool calls are content items in the message. I do like that. And the tool result can have a role. So considering all of these points, I'm going to put Google in maybe C tier. I wanted to put Google in B tier, but tool calls not having IDs, that's really bothering me. It might turn out that I'm wrong about that, and the documentation just wasn't showing the tool call IDs. So I'll make another clip and move it back to B at the end if that turns out to be the case, or maybe even higher. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. OpenAI. So OpenAI has that redundant type function wrapper, kind of like Google's function declarations wrapper, except this is on each object, which is a little less convenient, and it reserves a property name, so not great. Tool calls are in a property on the message called tool calls, and they're not content items, which I didn't like as much. And tools cannot have a role because tool results always have role tool. If I said tool calls can't have a role, I meant to say tool results can't have a role. So for me, that puts OpenAI in D tier, or it would. But when something is OpenAI compatible, that is amazing because I've already written code to interface with OpenAI and it works. So that moves it back up to C with Google. Just because it's so widespread, they've become a sort of a standard. Anthropic. Anthropic, they named the parameters and the tool definitions, they called input schema instead. I've been thinking about that a lot and I don't know how I feel about it because on one hand, parameters describes what it is and what it's for on a high level. Input schema describes what it is with a higher degree of specificity and perhaps more accurately. So I'm going to say it's kind of neutral. Those cancel each other out. Anthropic does have the call, the function call as an item in the content block, which I like, and tools can have a role. So it has the strong points that Google's format has, but without that negative point of not having a function call ID. I'm going to put it, yeah, I'm going to put it in A tier because there aren't really any negative points about it. I don't know what an S tier function calling format would look like. Maybe we'll find out one day, but I don't think I've seen one yet. Kind of an anticlimactic ending. I salvaged this video to the best of my ability. Maybe later I'll make a compilation of all the moments that I got frustrated with the implementation, trying to implement Gemini. It was really interesting as far as I remember. But anyhow, there's some other things that I want to do. I'm hoping to get a video out on everything that's happened in Pewter this month, And then I want to start maybe doing a This Week in Pewter sort of thing. I have videos that are more about what's been happening rather than just these technical videos where I go through certain things that I was doing. So keep looking out for those things. And thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting. Until next time.